might affect your behavior 10 years from now. There's an incredible wide range of scales that occur in biological organisms. And we're not used to, and we probably don't have the correct mathematics to deal with such systems. Genomics is an area where theorists of various types and theoretical physicists among them have been attracted simply because there's so much data. You know, once you publish the data, anybody can use it, and you know, you could figure out how it all works given the genomic code, which has been deciphered. But is there really a theory here? Can you make a theory of evolution? A thought and not just observe it, or observe the past, and can you actually predict the future? Well, you could do experiments, you could try. I don't think the answer to this is known how quantitative and how predictive the evolution of living matter can be made, but I suspect that one can be a lot more quantitative and predictive than one has in the past. I like to phrase another aspect of this by asking this question: can one tell the shape of an organism by looking at its genome? It's all in there somehow. And I imagine Theoretical Genomics 101 final exam in about 100 years from now. This is the final exam. Problem 1, based on this genetic sequence, draw a picture of the organism. And this is the answer. I don't know. Maybe. And finally, neuroscience. Neuroscience is an area where theoretical physicists have been interested for many decades. So one area of biology where even biologists admit there has to be a theory. You can't get started in discussing how the brain works without creating a model. You're not going to get very far just by observation. And so even just to deal with the data that you get by various ways of mapping the brain and its circuits or recording signals from it, you need to model the brain. So it's a great place for theoretical physicists. Some of them were at this conference, and these questions came from them, not from me, but they're wonderful. The obvious question that physicist types have been asking for a long time are trying to understand the principles of self-organization, which are most advanced in the brain, and are responsible for things like memory, which is very complicated, and even more so consciousness, whatever that is. And another question was asked by Nobel laureate condensed matter physicist Phil Anderson was, can one make a machine with free will, with teleonomic behavior? Or as a prelude to next talk, can one make a machine that has ethics, that faces ethical dilemmas? And finally, can one measure the onset of consciousness in an infant? Now, this is a question that I particularly like because most neuroscientists don't like to talk about consciousness unless they've had a few drinks. And how do you approach? It's a very complicated concept, clearly much more primitive than it will turn out to be. But the way one of the physicists asked a question about consciousness that doesn't require knowing what consciousness is. Can you measure the onset of consciousness in an infant? So the way I think about this is I plot consciousness versus age. And obviously most of us will agree that an embryo somewhere along its line of development doesn't have consciousness, isn't conscious. And most of us will also agree that a teenager is probably conscious. But somewhere in between, what we call consciousness turns on. And physicists often approach complex systems not by, trying to really understand the brain of an embryo or certainly not of a teenager, but trying to discuss the transition, the phase transition between these two different states. The simplest kind of question one could ask is the transition discontinuous? Does consciousness suddenly turn on? Or is it continuous? Now, this is an interesting question because it provokes, well, we don't know what consciousness is, so how can you measure it? Well, measure some correlate. And you can do this across species. There's a whole avenue of research possible. I think it's characteristic of the way a physicist would approach the problem of what is consciousness. Finally, I'm going to end with the question about the dangers that science faces, especially big science, which largely I focused on elementary particle physics, or cosmology, and astrophysics. One can see that traditional approaches to understanding the basic structure of matter that are forces and understanding the structure of the universe and its history are becoming unrealizable in the short term, 25 years or less. Today we rely on machines like this. This is a picture, an aerial photo of the outline of the Large Hadron Collider that is being completed now this year. Will turn on, runs between Switzerland and France, about 20 kilometers across. It costs billions of dollars. Each detector is a 5-story building which costs over $1 billion. The teams of physicists who have been working on this, preparing, have taken 15 years of their life, and there are thousands of them in each of the 2 collaborations that will do experiments at this facility. The effort is becoming, it is monumental. This is a project, in my opinion, one of the greatest projects of mankind, comparable to the building of the pyramids, and perhaps and probably more interesting. But it's getting out of human scale, and we're beginning to see that maybe we just can't keep going on forever. The same is true of the large instruments that we now send into space to map out the universe, to look for planets where life might exist, to look for signals from close to the birth of the universe. They too are becoming billion-dollar enterprises, and the time it takes to build them exceeds the lifetime of a graduate student. So, the big questions are still likely to be there. It would be unthinkable in human history to arrive at the point where we have all of those wonderful questions, some of which I outlined, and yet we will lack the will, money, or the ability to answer them, at least with the traditional tools. What new approaches should be considered now? I don't know the answer to that. So instead, I'm going to end on a question to which I do know the answer. All the talks until this talk have been in biology, biochemistry. Will physics continue to be important in the 21st century? Well, here I know the answer.